Okay, so the question in this video is, who is Tim Walz? Kamala Harris just selected Tim Walz to be her vice presidential running mate. This is a strange thing to announce this before the Democrat convention, but it's a strange year all the way around. Okay, before we get to talk about who Tim Walz is, let me talk about myself for just a moment. I'm a professor that provides context in the war in Ukraine. That's what this channel is all about. And I put in here about me, I say this: I'm a Reagan Republican who fully supports Ukraine. I'm a conservative without a candidate to vote for in November. So I'm not shilling for Trump. I know some people are going to say, well, he's just trying to do MAGA. No, what I'm going to try to do here is provide both views. Now, my audience is about 2/3 international and about 1/3 United States. So for the international audience, I'm trying to give you a view of here's how Democrats will see this guy, here's how Republicans will see this guy, and then we'll look at how moderates might see the guy. Okay, so let's talk about him. So let's win this. Here's Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. He looks like an affable enough guy, and maybe that's what they're going for here. I don't know. So let's first frame this way. For the U.S. presidential election, it's really not going to matter what's going to happen as far as Texas goes. Texas is going to be Republican. California is going to go Democrat. That's just the way it works. And there's enough offsetting states that there's about 6 swing states: Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Arizona, that are really going to determine the election. Because the states, as states, cast their electors for president. It's not every vote, it's each state has a certain number of electors, like 20 something in one state and 15 in another, depending on the size of the population. Okay, so I don't see a path to win the presidency for the Democrats without Pennsylvania, or it's a very, very narrow path. And so I was thinking, of course, she's going to tap Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, who's a Democrat. Okay, Jake Bro. Unlike Trump and Vance, Governor Tim Walz supports Ukraine and opposes Russia. Very true statement. But it's not just Walz that supports Ukraine and opposes Russia. Here's Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania, and he's in there, and he would have supported Ukraine just as much. Here's Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly's statement after senators meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Tim Kelly's from Arizona. He's from a swing state, just like Shapiro was from a swing state. And they're both more moderate, so they would have appealed more to the middle, to the center, and even to some perhaps moderate Republicans, but that wasn't who they chose. Here is The Guardian. The Guardian tends to be a left-wing newspaper. How could Tim Walz's political record help and hurt Harris? So, and again, I'm trying to be fair, so I'm going to try to show accurately what each side thinks about this. Walz served as Minnesota's governor since 2019 after 12 years in the House of Representatives and now leads the Democratic Governors Association. He has built a reputation as a folksy politician who can get things done, as Minnesota has adopted a number of progressive laws during his tenure. According to a poll conducted earlier this year, Walz enjoys an approval rating of 55% among Minnesotans. Now, 55% is reasonably good, but that's among Minnesotans, and that's important first. And then Shapiro had a 60% approval rating in a purple state, that is Pennsylvania. Purple means that it swings left and right. After the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, Walz was the first governor to enshrine abortion protections in state law. Well, he's on the left side of the spectrum. You'd expect him to have that kind of inclination. Sure, okay. Now, these are all the progressive or liberal things that he has done that will endear him to the left. He's also approved legislation that requires Minnesota to generate all of its energy from carbon-free resources by 2040. Walz enacted a swath of expansive voting rights measures. He signed a bill last year making it easier for people with a felony conviction to vote in Minnesota. The measure automatically allows people with felonies to vote once they leave prison. That's not normally how it functions, but okay, again, that's endearing to the left. Walz also legalized marijuana in the state, though his cannabis czar was forced to resign after it emerged that she had sold illegal marijuana products in the state. He also approved a bill that allows undocumented people to get a driver's license. Okay, so he's got all the liberal, progressive bona fides in his column. Now, how is he viewed from the other side of the spectrum? This is Mike Johnson, U.S. Speaker of the House, in his statement. The most liberal nominee to ever appear on a presidential ballot has now chosen a progressive running mate who has voiced support for socialism, supports sanctuary cities, and wants to give driver's license to the millions of illegals that Kamala Harris has allowed into our country. Okay, so that's how each side is going to frame this. Walz also received criticism in May of 2020 when the city of Minneapolis was engulfed in unrest following the murder of George Floyd. That happened in his state under his watch, and he will be tarred with it from the right, even if it's unfairly so. Now, this is the National Review's headline. Tim Walz's progressive agenda included giving driver's licenses free tuition to illegal immigrants. And remember, on the MAGA side, the enthusiasm to deal with illegal immigration is extremely high. So this is going to be a contrast between the two positions. Now, this is the Babylon Bee. It's a parody site, but it illustrates how the right is going to frame Walz moving forward. Tim Walz vows to make America as great as Minneapolis. Remember George Floyd and all the destruction that you saw there. Fairly or unfairly, that's what they're going to try to do to him, in my estimation. Minnesota is so far to the left that during the Reagan landslide in 1984, Reagan won every state in red and Mondale won the blue state, Minnesota. Okay, so that gives you a sense of where Minnesota is relative to the rest of the country. Look, I'm from New Jersey, and even New Jersey was bright red in that election. In fact, Minnesota is the state with the longest streak as a blue state, having last backed a Republican presidential nominee in Richard Nixon's 1972 landslide, and even sticking with the Democrats during Ronald Reagan's two landslides in 1980 and 1984. So that's where he's coming from, and I don't know that this was the best choice. Gary Kasparov seems to think this way as well. My thoughts on the Harris VP choice haven't changed now that it's been made. Walz may be charming, but not picking Shapiro, that's the governor of Pennsylvania, reflects tactical and strategic misjudgment. Locking up Pennsylvania was critical, as was having a fighter who could go toe-to-toe with the vicious attacks to come. The honeymoon is over and it's not a primary. Shapiro would counter Harris's woke ballast. That is, because she is pretty far to the left, Shapiro's moderate position would kind of temper that a little bit. But Harris wasn't comfortable with his abilities. Another poor indicator. You can't be comfortable and beat Trump. He lies, cheats, and steals. It's a street fight. With Shapiro, I'd have heavily bet on Harris to win, maybe even in a landslide. Trump will keep talking, Vance will keep doing whatever it is he does, and the Biden map was an easy reach. Now, I'm not so sure. Not just because of Walz, but because what it says about the Harris campaign. It was a choice akin to Kerry's 2004 between Vibes candidate Edwards and a practical choice to lock down a key state in Gephardt. Gephardt was the former Speaker of the House. Walz now also reminds me of Hillary picking Kaine, a blank space who contributes nothing concrete. Kaine was the governor of Virginia. You have to take risks to win. Now, this reminded me of what just happened in Britain. Here's Keir Starmer, and here's Jeremy Corbyn. Corbyn was very hard on the left-hand side of the spectrum, and he lost in a landslide. Starmer, in contrast, moved a little bit more toward the middle. Progressives held their noses, but they won. So what I'm seeing is that there's not the same balance in the ticket that you saw here with Trump and Pence. And you're saying, wait a minute, Pence, he's very conservative. Yes, but he's not very conservative. He's a populist who conservatives were skeptical of, and Pence made Trump more palatable to the conservatives. Now, that's not the same with Trump and Vance. By picking Vance, Trump doubled down on MAGA, and I think that Kamala is doing the same progressive double downing with Walz, but that's just the perspective of the right. The left is very happy with Walz because Walz checks all the boxes. The right is very happy because he's not Josh Shapiro. Josh Shapiro was a real threat, as was Senator Kelly. But maybe there's another reason. Tim Walz hunts, he ice fishes, he talks about rural America and how Donald Trump doesn't understand it. He's not afraid to mix it up. He speaks in plain speak. He's a former football coach and a former teacher. So maybe they're just looking for the personable, folksy kind of angle. Maybe that's it. I don't know, but that may be what those in the middle, in the center, the moderates, are looking for, and maybe they're not as concerned about his voting record. So I think his strongest selling point is he seems like an affable guy, and 71% have never heard of him. So, but the contrast is a real strong contrast now. I think it was an unforced error, and what I'm seeing is that conservatives are very happy about this choice because they think it's more beatable, and that's just what I'm seeing in the media now. Now, I don't like this. Meet Tim Walz, who lives in a van down by the river. Now, that's an homage to the Chris Farley skit on Saturday Night Live. There's no reason to be making fun of somebody in that kind of way when you can talk about their political positions. Now, he's got background. He's a former congressman. He was the highest NCO in the U.S. Army, I believe, that served in Congress. He's a governor currently, so he's not an empty suit. He's just a very progressive suit. And that contrast will be very visible. Okay, last thing I want to talk about, Vance is campaigning in Pennsylvania, and it looks like he's campaigning for Harris. Terrible advanced teamwork. Look at this. I think this says Kamala Chaos, but it just doesn't... just doesn't look right. Okay, my friends, I hope that was fair to Walz and showed here's what Democrats think, here's what Republicans think, but what matters is what the moderates in each of these states thinks. I think this was a missed opportunity to select Shapiro or to select Kelly and to go with the governor here, although maybe that governor can persuade Wisconsin and Michigan to turn blue. I don't know, but that's where we are. I'm curious what you think about this. I try to be fair. As one of my viewers said, I'm trying to talk about politics without being political, and that's a hard thing to do. All right, tell me what you thought in the comments below. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.